Chapter 7. Lincoln Rally. Big news from the dinosaur dig. They found a Camptosaurus skull fragment about the size of a paint chip. The scientists are pretty amped up about it, but not half as amped up as my father. "This is exactly what we needed," he crows. "A huge chunk of good news to take all that swastika nonsense off the front pages." "I wouldn't use the word nonsense," Mom calls over the electric motor of the treadmill in the den. She's been on a fitness kick lately. I think it helps her keep her mind off the problems at the school. "You'll see," Dad exclaims. "Now that the dig has produced something exciting, the publicity is going to start pouring out of here. It's happened just the way I pictured it." He sits down at the computer and opens a Google search. I'm relieved. Dad's already warned me about how sorry I'll be if Wexford Smythe University pulls out of here because they don't like having fertilizer dumped in their mail slot. In his eyes, the peat moss prank put my future in jeopardy. But there's nothing like a brand spanking new 100-million-year-old paint chip to keep a guy's future on track. Dad's brow furrows and the pounding of his fingers on the keyboard becomes downright violent. "What's the matter with these people? Where's my skull fragment?" I hear Mom speeding up on the treadmill in the den. I peer over Dad's shoulder at the screen. The search for keywords Camptosaurus skull brings up websites advertising realistic dinosaur interaction and model Camptosaurus skeleton, ages 7 and up, swallowing hazard. When he adds Wexford Smythe University, we get pictures of a tree-lined campus and the course syllabus for their infrared astronomy program. "Try chokecherry," I suggest. I wish I hadn't. When he types the name of our town into the search field, a single word jumps out at us, appearing 17 times on the page. Swastika. "Third swastika appears at Chokecherry Middle School. Swastika graffiti rattles mountain community. Sheriff baffled by swastika incidents. Swastikas dredge up county's racist past." It goes on and on. "No wonder everybody hates the media," Dad complains bitterly. "Leave it to them to focus on the negative and ignore a major scientific find." I can't see Mom on the treadmill, but she must be running pretty fast. Her footsteps are rat-tat-tatting like a machine gun. I point to one of the results in the middle of the screen. "Wow, ReelTok. He's one of the top vloggers on the web." Dad's brow furrows. "Vloggers?" "Video bloggers," I translate. "Everybody follows ReelTok." He glares at me as if I've done something evil. "Really? You've heard of this guy?" He clicks on the link. A YouTube clip opens up, and there's the famous face of Adam Talk, the internet personality who calls himself ReelTok. As always, he's so close to the camera that the frame shows him only from eyebrows to mid-chin. It makes him seem even more intense than he already is, with his burning eyes, rapid-fire clipped speech, and slight lisp. "I read your comments, Talk Nation. Get out of the city, you tell me. Get away from the crime and the garbage and the fights to the death over a lousy parking space. Find a small town with fresh air and friendly people, where the night jasmine wafts like perfume in through the windows. Wonderful idea." Suddenly, his unibrow arches into a V, and his cheeks flame red. "How about Chokecherry, Colorado, where they paint swastikas at the middle school?" Dad hits the escape key, and ReelTok disappears. "What's with this clown, Link? It says he's from New York City. What's it his business what goes on around here?" "That's ReelTok's trademark," I try to explain. He starts off speaking reasonably about something, and pretty soon he blows his stack and starts yelling. It's hilarious. "But why is he yelling about Chokecherry?" Dad demands. "It's nothing personal. He can freak out over anything. You should have seen the episode he did when his Wi-Fi went out. He blamed it on God." My father is furious. "If you find this hilarious, then you deserve the kind of future you're going to get. This man has never been to Chokecherry. He knows nothing about our community, but it's just fine for him to slander us to millions of people on the internet." "He's joking," I insist. "Today it's Chokecherry, tomorrow it'll be something else. The weather, gas prices, chocolate milk that isn't chocolatey enough." Dad is adamant. The Chamber of Commerce should sue. I'm going to put it to a vote. No one has the right to lie about our town. Technically, he didn't lie, I point out. The swastikas at our school are 100% real. Dad brings down the cover of the laptop so hard, it's a miracle there aren't computer keys bouncing off the ceiling. I'm going for a walk, he rasps, and is out of the house in a flash, slamming the door behind him. In the silence, I notice that the treadmill isn't going anymore. Short workout today, I observe to Mom. But when I poke my head into the den, I see her slumped on the love seat, looking like she's lost her last friend. What's the matter? A terrible thought occurs to me. Did Dad invest all our money in Dino Land? She's surprised. No, nothing like that. We're fine, we just wouldn't be filthy rich, which is okay with me. So what's bugging you? I know Dad flips out when there's swastika news, but he always calms down in the end. Swastika news, she repeats wanly. I never thought swastika news was something we'd have to worry about in our lives. We don't, I insist. I get that swastikas are dangerous when Nazis and white supremacists use them, but this is probably just some rotten kid. Maybe, Mom says dubiously. But I don't like these stories about the 70s and burning crosses. If that's coming back, it isn't, I promise. And even if it was, I mean, it's not right and all that, but it wouldn't be a threat to our family. To my amazement, 2 big tears squeeze out of her eyes and roll down her cheeks. I'm blown away. I've never seen her cry before. Are you okay? I ask. She answers with another question. Have you ever noticed about my relatives? How all my cousins are on Grandpa's side and not Grandma's? I don't know what I expected her to say, but that wasn't it. I never thought about it, I admit. But it makes sense. Grandma grew up in an orphanage, right? She nods. Right. In France. Did you ever consider what that might mean? I'm mystified. That we're part French? That brings on a watery smile. I suppose we are, but that's not the point. Grandma never knew her parents, but she wasn't orphaned at birth. Her parents gave their baby to the nuns to save her life. What? This is the part of the story I haven't heard before. Why? It was 1941, Mom explains. France was under Nazi occupation. My grandparents gave up their baby girl because they were about to be arrested and sent to a concentration camp. A concentration camp? I echo in shock. What did they do wrong? Don't you get it? She demands, biting back more tears. My family is Jewish. The nuns raised Grandma as a Catholic child, but she's Jewish too. This isn't making any sense to me. No, she isn't. We were there last Christmas. They had a tree and everything. She never knew, Mom tells me. Not until 3 years ago when the convent released its records. She was the only survivor in my family. Her parents and all her relatives died in the Holocaust, murdered by the Nazis. By the time she found out, she had lived almost 80 years as a Christian woman. She married and raised her family in the faith. That's how I was brought up. But I know what my background is, and now you know yours. I'm stunned. We're Jewish? Well, your dad's not, and I'm only half, which I guess makes you a quarter. She puts a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Nothing's different, Link. We're still the same people. It'll still be Christmas and Easter. We're not changing churches or religions at this stage of the game, but when you say swastikas have nothing to do with us, that's just not true. Does Dad know? She smiles. Of course he does. He's very supportive. That's why he's been so upset over the swastikas. I know you think he only cares about Dino Land, but it's mostly because of me. And you. It's like the house is spinning all around me. How is it possible to wake up one person and by the end of the day you're somebody else? Jewish? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's a thing I'm just not. I don't even know anybody Jewish. Well, not technically true. I know Dana, barely. She's not from Chokecherry, but besides that, she's pretty normal, and her dad can take a joke about dino poop, even when the joke is on him. Finding out you're different from what you thought you were is weird. But when the difference is basically nothing, how different are you? Not at all, right? Right? When were you planning on telling me this? I ask. Never? You're upset. Of course I'm upset, I explode. All these years I've been somebody I didn't even know I was. You're supposed to tell me big things like this. She looks unhappy. I'm sorry. I was waiting for the right time, and I guess it never came. Remember, I went through this myself 3 years ago, so I know how confused you must feel, but I eventually understood that I'm the same me. It's an important thing to know about our past, but our present is what really matters. Our lives, our family, you, me, and Dad, that hasn't changed at all. I back away. You still should have told me. Mom's tearing up again, and I'm not in the mood to feel bad about it. For the past 3 weeks, I've done nothing but learn about intolerance and racism and Nazism and the Holocaust, and she never said one little peep about this. I think I have the right to be mad. Dad, too. He hasn't shut up about the swastikas for 5 seconds since all this started. Didn't it occur to him to mention that our family might have a special interest in it? That's kind of a key piece of information if you ask me, but nobody asked me anything. So what now? According to Mom, I should just ignore the whole thing. But how's that supposed to work? I picture the conversation with Jordy. Me. What were you up to today? Jordy. Played a little ball, helped out my old man in the shop. You? Me. Nothing much. I found out I've been the wrong religion my whole life. Want to play some Xbox? Or a text exchange with Pouncy. Pouncy. How are you? Me. Jewish. I'm not really serious, but it suddenly hits me. Pouncy's grandfather was in the KKK, and Pouncy's dad is a notorious jerk about practically everything, and that includes being racist. I've never heard Mr. Pouncy say anything against Jewish people, but that's only because he doesn't know any Jewish people. Correction, he doesn't think he does. I'm Jewish, part Jewish, 25%. True, that doesn't mean anything about Pouncy himself, but it's kind of uncomfortable. It wasn't uncomfortable yesterday, even though I understood how awful the Klan was. What's different? Yesterday I didn't know. So much for Mom's idea that nothing has changed. Another lie. To be fair, my parents didn't technically lie, but only because it never occurred to me to ask them, say, we wouldn't happen to be Jewish, would we? Mom thinks this is no biggie. She got used to it. Why can't I? It'll fade into the background as soon as my life gets busy again, with friends, sports, school. At the thought of the school, I get a clear vision of the big red swastika freshly painted in the atrium. It's the same symbol, same color, same right angles, but I can feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up at the sight of it. I picture Grandma as a little baby being handed over to total strangers and never seeing her family again. My mind runs through everything we've learned about Nazi Germany these past 3 weeks of tolerance education and during the Holocaust unit in 5th grade. It used to seem like ancient history, but this happened to my family. Where are my cousins on Grandma's side? They were never born because their parents and grandparents were murdered by Nazis. I feel like I'm losing it. All these ideas are whirling around my brain, building up the pressure until my skull starts to crumble. I've got to find a way to let it out. Talk to somebody maybe, but who? My parents? They're the ones who kept me in the dark all these years. My friends? They'd be just as weirded out as I am. Is there anyone around here who'd understand? Chapter 8. Dana Levinson. I have swastika anxiety. I see them everywhere, in clouds, in wallpaper patterns, in the weave of a rug. Once your brain goes in that direction, it'll drive you crazy. I see one in my spaghetti, and no matter how many times I push my dinner around with a fork, the noodles keep reforming into that awful pattern. Eventually, my little brother Ryan notices me staring into the bowl with a murderous look in my eyes. So he takes that as the okay to reenact the Battle of Gettysburg on his plate, complete with sound effects of gunfire and muted cries of "Charge!" Pretty soon, tomato sauce is splattering all over the table. Dad sighs. If you don't like it, you two, you don't have to eat it. But please stop making a mess. This from a guy who spends his days carving fossils out of sandstone using a chisel and a paintbrush. He usually comes home looking like he's taken a mud bath. At least that's what my mother says. She works with the scientists too, cataloging their finds. So she stays clean most of the time. The only thing worse than seeing swastikas where they're not is dreading where they'll turn up next. Whoever's doing all this must feel pretty strongly about it because they're putting the awful things everywhere. Scratched into lockers, duct taped to windows, decorating bulletin boards and display cases. There have been a total of 8 incidents, and nobody has a clue who's doing it. The school has even hired extra security to try to catch the culprit in the act. So far, no luck. They have only one theory, that the guilty party is a kid. Every day, 600 of us show up for school, and there aren't enough employees in the district and cops in town to spy on each and every one of us. I don't have to see it to know that a new swastika has popped up somewhere. Suddenly, people are being friendly to me and noticing I'm alive. How am I doing, they ask. How am I holding up, considering, I get that they're just trying to be nice. Does it make me a bad person that I find their sympathy almost as upsetting as the swastikas that bring it on? Andrew and the other Asian kids don't get that kind of attention. And nobody worries about the Black and Latino kids who probably don't feel great about this either. It's just me, the Jewish girl. I can't get past the feeling that this is just some juvenile delinquent trying to freak everybody out. And the worst part is, it's working. All those stories from the 70s, burning crosses, Ku Klux Klan, what if our family becomes a target? My parents have been checking in with me every day. I'm under strict orders to tell them if anyone says or does something threatening. They're a little more hands-off with Ryan. Nobody wants to traumatize a second grader. But even he gets a nightly stealth interrogation. Have you noticed friends treating you differently lately? Have you been overhearing new words you don't understand? One day he asks, "What's a Swastika?" Mom doesn't miss a beat, almost like she was expecting it. "It's a wet, muddy place where tadpoles and lizards live." She says it so naturally, so matter-of-factly, that my brother accepts it and moves on. I envy my little brother. I hope he gets to stay clueless forever, but I doubt it. The swastikas are big news and getting bigger. Dad has been driving Ryan and me to school instead of making us walk. So much for kids don't get enough fresh air and exercise anymore. I watch as Ryan slams the car door and scampers into his elementary school. I wish I was 7. Ryan's biggest worry is what flavor of pudding pop Mom packed in his lunch. Dad doesn't take the bait, probably because he knows where I'm going with this. Sometimes it's not that great being raised by 2 PhDs. They're always miles ahead of you. He steers our SUV into the road and starts across the neighborhood toward the middle school. This time I say it outright. "Dad, do you think the university would transfer you and Mom to another town?" He glances sideways at me. "Well, we were trying for Paris, but turns out there aren't any Diplodocus skeletons buried under the Eiffel Tower." "It isn't exactly fun, I complain, being the only Jewish kid while all this swastika stuff is going on. He pulls up in front of the student drop-off. "Mom and I know it can't be pleasant. We both grew up in places where we were far from the only Jewish kids, and we know coming here would be an adjustment, even before these incidents began." "Yeah, but now, from what I've seen, your school is staying on top of it. Nobody's trying to sweep this under the rug. I believe they'll find out who's doing it. And my hope is that we'll all see that it's just thoughtless mischief and poses no danger to this family. However," he looks me straight in the eye, "if you or your brother are unsafe in any way, we will not stay here. Period." "But I still have to go to school," I conclude wearily. "But you still have to go to school." I sigh and get out of the car. Dad might be right about the true motivation behind the swastikas, but he doesn't have to be me. He doesn't know what it's like expecting to see it on the office bulletin board or the atrium wall. He can't understand how it feels to scan a crowd of faces, searching for the expression of sympathy that says it's happened again. Welcome to my world. No stairs today. Could I get that lucky? I'm almost all the way down the main hall, and not a single person has pulled me aside to tell me how sorry they are about the bad news. Uh-oh. Someone is standing in front of my locker. Wait, that's Link Rowley. He's kind of the star athlete big man on campus around here. He's also the guy who pranked my father's office. I sincerely doubt he wants anything to do with me. "Dana, can I talk to you?" So much for that theory. Okay, what about? He looks around furtively, like an escaped convict keeping an eye out for the police. Not here. He grabs my arm and drags me to the stairwell. He waits for a couple of kids to disappear up the steps before speaking. And even then, it's a barely audible whisper. I can't hear you, I say self-consciously. I'm not used to popular boys talking to me in any school, much less this one. What's going on? I said, I think I'm Jewish. Whatever shyness I might have had around him vanishes as my anger flares. You think that's funny after everything that's been happening? No, seriously, I just about bite his head off. How many of your idiot friends are about to jump out and have a good laugh at the Jewish girl? It isn't like that at all. Listen to me. The story that pours out of him is too stunning to be a joke. That his grandmother was handed over as a baby to nuns to escape the Nazis. She was the only one of her Jewish family to survive the Holocaust. That's awful, I tell him, and I mean it. But why are you just bringing this up now? I only found out yesterday, he explains earnestly. Nobody ever told me, but this swastika business has got my mom all upset. I take stock of him. He's 1,000% serious and pretty emotional about it too. Unless he's the greatest actor in history, I totally believe that he's just found this out about himself. I can see how that's pretty heavy news, I tell him. I know, that's why I came straight to you. That brings me up short. To me? Why? He regards me in surprise. Because you're Jewish. So maybe you can tell me, what to do. I'm at a total loss. My great-great-grandparents emigrated to America at the turn of the 20th century. Any relatives of mine who died in the Holocaust were cousins of ancestors I never knew. Nothing nearly as close as what Link just described. What do your parents say? I ask him. They want to ignore the whole thing, he tells me. But you can't listen to them. They're the ones who kept me in the dark. I'm not going to let them stop me from being who I am. Wait a minute. I struggle for the right words. Are you saying you want to be Jewish? Like, change your religion? He shrugs unhappily. I don't know. It's not like religion is a big part of my life to begin with. We're not regular churchgoers or anything like that. We're not that religious either, I tell him. We don't keep kosher or go to services every week. We're 100 miles from the nearest synagogue, and my family's okay with it. We still celebrate holidays, but we do it our own way. My parents are fossil hunters. Their careers are more important to them than being religious. But you're definitely Jewish, right? He seems so anxious about it that I have to laugh. 100%, I assure him. In fact, you are too, technically. The tradition is it goes by the female line. If your grandmother's Jewish and your mother's Jewish, then so are you. His face grows animated. See, that's the kind of thing I need to know. What else have you got? I smile. I'm not a rabbi. Why is this so important to you? For someone who's never struck me as being the kind of guy who chooses his words carefully, Link seems to be thinking very hard about what he wants to say. I can't quite explain it. All my life, it's been like everybody knows more about me than I do. My dad talks about my future as if he sees it and I don't. My friends look at me as a certain kind of person, sporty, popular, a joker, and that fits, but not all the way. Now suddenly, I found out that I've been somebody different from the start. I'm confused about whether the things I'm doing are actually things I should be doing, It's as if the shock of this news jump-started his brain, and I have no idea what to tell him. I'm not the official welcoming committee for Judaism, but I recognize I'm all he's got. And one of the things I do know about being Jewish is that we don't turn our backs on people who come to us for help. The bell rings, offering rescue from this very unexpected conversation. Okay, I venture, thanks for sharing. I start walking away. But we're not finished, he protests. We have homeroom. You can't leave me hanging, he insists. You've been Jewish your whole life, but I'm 13 years behind. I have no idea what to do. The number 13 sticks in my brain. Bar mitzvah lessons, I blurt. He goggles at me. He has no idea what I'm talking about. That's what a 13-year-old Jewish guy is usually doing, I explain, preparing for his bar mitzvah. Really, I have to go. And before he can reply, I step into the stampede of kids that fills the hallway. When I glance over my shoulder, Link is still in the stairwell, a stunned expression on his face. Chapter 9. Link and Rowley. Dad's eyes are as wide as saucers. You want to be Jewish? That's not what I'm saying, I tell him. I'm saying I want to have a bar mitzvah. Which is something Jewish people have. If you go by the rules, I'm as Jewish as anybody, I argue. I get it from Mom, and she gets it from Grandma. I spoke to Dana Levinson a couple of times at school today, and she explained the whole thing. And I checked it out on Google. My father's tone drips with sarcasm. Well, if Google says it's okay, then by all means, let's turn our lives upside down and change everything about ourselves. You're not listening, I insist. I don't want to change everything. I just want to try this and see how it feels. I'm 13, which is perfect bar mitzvah timing. My mother has been silent for most of this conversation, trying to shrink behind the pork chop on her plate. She's pretty shaken up, but I don't think she's as determined as my father to say this isn't happening. For one thing, Dad keeps glancing in her direction, expecting her to jump in and support him. It hasn't happened. Mostly, she just looks torn. Finally, she speaks up. I didn't know. Being Jewish follows the mother's line. So you're Jewish too, I inform her. You could have a bat mitzvah. Dana had hers right before she moved here. You'd be kind of late, though, like 27 years. No, thank you, she replies faintly. But Link, this is just not practical. There's no synagogue in Chokecherry. I thought of that. The nearest one is in Shadbush Crossing. Temple, Judea. That's 100 miles away. Dad explodes. Yeah, but we'll only have to go once for the actual thing, I reason. Rabbi Gold says, hold up. Dad pushes his plate away, his dinner untouched. Who's Rabbi Gold? I called over there, I supply. He's pretty chill, and Temple Judea is Reform, which is super chill. Their take on the rules is more welcoming for someone like me. Most of their bar and bat mitzvah kids have been learning Hebrew since they were little, so I'm way behind. But the rabbi says that if I'm really, truly committed to this, he can design a kind of bar mitzvah crash course. He'll write the Hebrew parts out phonetically, so I don't have to learn a whole different alphabet. I'll practice at home and work with him on Zoom. But he wants to talk to you guys before we pick out a date. You know, just to make sure everything's kosher. I wink. My father actually flinches, like I've taken a swipe at him. Typical. It's always about him. You know why the rabbi wants to talk to us, Link? He asks. Because he notices, as we do, that all this is complete and total nonsense. I've been expecting this, and I already know what I'm going to say. It isn't really when you think about it. I get that it's unusual, but you take all the details one by one, nothing is nonsense. The Jewish part is totally on the up and up. Even Rabbi Gold says so. Learning my bar mitzvah part phonetically is doable, especially since the rabbi is willing to work with me on Zoom. And Shadbush Crossing isn't the moon, so it won't kill us to drive there one Saturday. Dad's unimpressed. Just because something's doable doesn't mean you have to do it. I know you, Link. You're not feeling any great religious calling. If you've been to church a dozen times in your life, it's a lot. And even then, you had to be dragged, kicking and screaming. You think it'll be any different if there's a Star of David on the hymn book instead of a cross? What's all this really about? I sit back with a sigh. There's no way to explain it to him. There's no way to tell him everything. And even the parts of it I understand aren't the kind of things we ever talk about. Do I suddenly feel the need to have another religion? No. Is my life now going to be all about Judaism? No. But my life should be about something, even if I haven't figured out what it is yet. A lot of things have happened lately to get me thinking about that. So when Mom told me the truth about Grandma, I couldn't just file it away under who cares and go back to being the old me. I picture my grandmother, all 4'10" of her. We've been measured back to back ever since I was old enough to stand. I've been taller from the age of 9 on up. How could something so huge have happened to someone so small? I'm as honest as I can be with him. I wish I could tell you, Dad. It's like I'm exploring, even though I don't really know what I'm looking for. The rabbi says this could be my way of honoring Grandma's relatives who died in the Holocaust and all my cousins who never got the chance to be born. The only thing I'm sure of is I have to try. My mother gets up, walks over to my chair, and hugs me so hard I can't breathe for a moment. That's beautiful, she says with a little sniffle, especially with this horrible swastika business going on. Dad knows when the jig is up. All right, he grumbles. I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but let's have a bar mitzvah. I corner Dana in the cafeteria line the next day at lunch. Hey, what are you doing December 4th? She regards me warily. I don't know. Why? I beam at her. Well, save the date because you're invited to my bar mitzvah. She staggers a little, and a bowl of hot vegetable soup topples off her tray and lands on my sneakers. Oh, sorry, she apologizes. I grab a fistful of napkins and dab at my shoes. Not exactly the reaction I was expecting. I thought you'd be happy. This is a joke, right? No, I'm serious, I tell her. It's at Temple Judea in Shadbush Crossing. 10 a.m. Your whole family's invited since you'll need a ride. She looks horrified. But I was only kidding about the bar mitzvah. Yeah, but I wasn't. You were right about the female line thing. Rabbi Gold says I'm 100% legit. It's just that she's grasping for the right words. When I had my bat mitzvah, I'd been in Hebrew school since I was 7. You can't just start from scratch now and be ready by December. Already taken care of, I assure her. Rabbi Gold's hooking me up with everything I need written out phonetically. I won't have to learn how to read Hebrew, and he'll tell me what it all means so we can talk about it. He's big on making sure I understand what I'm saying. Don't worry, Dana, I've got this. So what do you think? Her lower lip quivers. It's all my fault. Huh? When I said you should be practicing for your bar mitzvah, I was just trying to get rid of you so I could go to homeroom. It was a joke. Even when you kept asking about it, I didn't expect you to call a rabbi. We don't even have a rabbi in this town. Well, you might have been kidding, but you were right. Just because you weren't serious doesn't mean it wasn't great advice. So you're a yes for December 4th? She's flustered. I'll have to ask my folks. To be honest, I go on, I was hoping to hit you up for a little help once Rabbi Gold emails me the stuff I have to learn. You know, since you've been through this already. She's been holding her tray for this entire conversation, so her arms are probably getting tired, even though her lunch must be lighter without the soup. I should eat now, she says. Sure, let's find a spot. I follow her to one of the long tables, where she establishes herself near Andrew Yee, Michael Amorosa, and Caroline McNutt. Jordy and Pouncey are waving at me to join them at the table, where they're eating with Pamela and Sophie. I wave back, but set down my brown lunch bag next to Dana. It would be a jerk move to abandon her right after hitting her up for a favor. There's a lively conversation going on between Andrew, Michael, and Caroline, but by the time Dana and I sit down, it's all petered out, and the three are staring at me. Those guys aren't really my crowd. Michael's artsy, Caroline's into student government, and Andrew's another one of the scientist kids, like Dana. What's up? I say to break the ice. We're talking about the student council meeting after school, Caroline explains. Michael delivers an elaborate fake yawn, and she snaps at him. Well, that's the whole problem. Nobody ever comes to council meetings because they're boring, but today's is really important. We need to come up with a response to the swastikas. Something so strong that whoever's doing it will see this is not who we are, and we're not going to take it anymore. She turns to Dana. You're coming, right? Well, Dana hems and haws. Caroline cuts her off. You have to be there. You're the only Jewish kid in the whole school. Not true, I burst in. Caroline frowns. Who else is there? Me. There's stunned silence around the table, so I go on. Okay, it's pretty new, but it's definitely true. I just found out, so I'm taking it slow. Step 1 is my bar mitzvah. Dana's idea. Dana sinks a little lower in her seat. Caroline is the first to recover her voice. So you're coming too, right? I would rather be deep fried in boiling oil than sit through one of Caroline's student council meetings. But once again, the image of that first swastika comes back to me, and I feel a chill down my spine. I understand it better now. It's hard for me to imagine Grandma's family dying in the Holocaust, since for sure they'd all be gone by now anyway. It's Rabbi Gold who planted the phantom cousins in my mind, the ones who never had a chance to be born. One student council meeting is a small price to pay for all of them. We'll be there, I promised Caroline.